Hey guys, I'm Naya and welcome back to the channel. So today I have a guest with me and I'm so pleased to introduce to you guys, if you don't know him already, which you probably do, Jesse Cotton. I am thrilled to have him on the channel today. We're going to go over the ban list very quickly and then we're just going to have just a short discussion about a couple things, about a couple questions that all of us are asking ourselves right now probably. So I'm excited to have his perspective on all of that as well. So welcome to the channel.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to discuss, Yu-Gi-Oh!
Of course.
Game we all love, so I'm always happy to be talking about it.
Well, it's great to have you. To begin with, I figured we would just go over the ban list. First of all, what did you think about the entire ban list? Do you feel like it touched everything it should have?
So it's going to be a bit of a biased perspective coming from myself.
That's fair.
I love the tier element deck, so seeing that deck hit so hard is a bit sad. But at the same time, the format had been getting a little boring. I think people were getting a bit sick of it, even myself. So to see it shaken up a bit is nice.
That's fair, but I figured we would just get a lighter hit. I was a huge fan of the tier deck as well, and I just feel like, we should have gotten a light hit first.
I think they saw what happened in the OCG, where they gave it a lighter hit and then it almost did nothing.
Yeah.
So they wanted to take more drastic measures immediately. I thought maybe if they were to do a lighter hit, they'd have another list not that far from now. This has me thinking this will be the only list we have for a couple months, at least maybe until the WCQ season.
Yeah, I agree. We might get one in like May or June or something like that. But not before
that would mean the 250th is under this list, which I think is pretty likely at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I think that makes sense. So, do you feel like the barrier statue was a good hit?
Absolutely. That deck was toxic. And Fonderies is actually a relatively interesting archetype when it's not floodgating your opponent out like that. Because I think it has great recursion. It can still do a lot of stuff in one turn without being a special summon extra deck heavy type deck. And it's not really a normal back row deck like you would think a Labyrinth or Eldritch. So I actually think the deck is rather interesting, but in its old form where it was just either shifter or a statue, and that's really all it did, it wasn't that cool. So I'm happy to see that not be an option anymore.
Oh, I agree. 100%. It's like, it was too much when they were able to have the barrier statue as like protection to make sure everything else is, going off and working because you can't special summon. And it's like, which deck has wins? There's literally none. There is literally almost nothing. Like a unicorn is a win, right? The Kashtira unicorn. So I guess that's a special summon.
Which wasn't really a thing even before, but I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's pretty much it. It was a bit easier going up against Draco Slayer because we have a lot of win special summons. So that's cool, but that's pretty much it. It was still stunning the entire meta, so it had to go.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna discuss all of the elephants in the room later. The scythe hit was great. It felt a little late, but it was nice.
Better late than never.
Yeah, that's very true. So the Ancient Fairy Dragon, we saw what happened in the OCG. Do you feel like the errata is going to have an impact? Do you feel like the card is going to see play? And overall, what do you feel about erratas in general? Do you feel like a card should stay banned or come back changed?
So I guess I'll tackle this one at a time. The Ancient Fairy Dragon, how do I think it'll impact? I don't know what it did in the OCG. I'm assuming not much, and I think it'll be similar here.
Yeah, I didn't
where it
see
pops
anything.
up as cool, maybe engine pieces sometimes, where like, especially now with the Strudo at 3, some decks with multiple field spells can cycle through them a bit easier without having some dumb FTK. But as for erratas in general, I'm typically not a big fan of them. I'd rather they just make new cards that do similar things, and they've done that in the past as well. So they've taken both approaches. I prefer not having to ban cards with different text. It just feels weird to me.
Yeah.
And as someone who likes to play all these old formats and sealed formats or whatever, it makes it weird when we're drafting. Which effect do we use?
That's true.
Do I would use the old one or the new one? That's obviously a small grievance, but I don't know. I feel like it kind of butchers the integrity of the game a little bit to have that happen.
I agree. I
What do
don't
you think?
like it. I don't like it at all. I feel like having a card on the ban list is sort of representative of everything that it did, and it just feels off. A card like Ancient Fairy Dragon, I think, is still powerful. So if it is able to see some play and actually grant some decks, the ability of doing well. I think that is nice for that particular deck. Imagine if something just gets pushed over the edge because of Age of Fairy Dragon. That's great. But I still don't
very well
really
could be, right? And we saw Resort go to 3 as well. So like there are plenty of that was a deck that used Ancient Fairy Dragon. So
yes, I remember. That was oh my god. That's a flashback. That's horrible. but yeah, okay. So the Strula the 3 and all of the other ones, but the Strula first. What do you think about it? Like the Strula saw play, for example, in Sorzo, with the Bestios, which they might start cutting Bestios moving forward, or they'll still keep it in. There's a couple neat lines you can do with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I think Destrudo is only really going to see play in Sorcerer if you're playing Bestials, at which point it's a searchable card you want to use, so just one is fine. So like it would just be 3 Magnamut and 1 Destrudo, or 1 Destrudo and a Balldrake or Jewess Worm, and that's it. But Destrudo itself in that point is just a level 3 extender, at which point it could be almost anything else and not paying half your life points.
True.
The card is good, for sure.
Yes.
It is a grave effect, something that we don't have a million of. And then typically when we get them, they end up being hit.
Yes.
And it's a level manipulating tuner, which is really strong. Right now, a lot of good synchros aren't legal, but it can be pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's.
Yeah, I think it's fine. Destrudo,
I think it's okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be insane right now.
Yeah, I'm not exactly worried about it. So speaking of worried, are you worried about dinos? How do you feel about Lithosagem coming back to 3?
I think Lithosagem to 3 kind of pales in comparison to the dinos that were just announced from the set coming out in, I think, June.
Yes, I wanted to ask you that as well. What do you think about the support?
They're fantastic. However, the thing with those support cards is it's like 3 main deck cards. And I have to ask myself, is that enough to make this deck consistent? Like this is a deck that's always historically struggled with consistency.
It has, for sure.
So is that something that we have fixed now? I'm not quite sure it is, but I'm also not a dinosaur expert. So
all right, that's fair.
Very easily could be wrong. Yeah.
I'm interested to see what happens with them. Servant of Endymion, I love that. I'm personally a huge fan of Pendulums, and I played a lot of Endymion. So it's very cool. However, I don't think it's exactly something to be afraid of. I don't think it's something to really think about right now. Especially number 1, I think Draco Slayer is better, at least in my opinion. Number 2, Kashtira is locking your zones, which just breaks my heart. But like Servant to 3, I guess, is fine because of all of these reasons.
Yeah, I think it's not I think that one's fine. It's not really needing to be there, and like maybe it can be used in a couple powerful combos, but so many cards you can say that for. So I don't think Servant to 3 is fine. Yeah.
All right, and then we have the other ones. Resort. I mean, without Master Plan, it's almost whatever. And Jet Synchron, Olayan, Yatagarasu, all of them are fine, I think.
Jet would probably be the biggest one that could go wrong. It's lets you keep summoning out tuners and do some easy plays. That and Destrudo have the biggest potential, I think, but right now they're fine, and it's just they could be a problem later down the line.
True. All right, so with that, we went over everything but the tier and sprite deck and all of that. So I prepared a couple of topics for us to discuss. And please, you're always welcome to join in the conversation in the comments down below, guys. So let us know what your thoughts are on all of these questions and topics we're going to be asking ourselves today. So the number 1 thing I wanted to talk about is what is going to happen to tier. There is a lot of engines that are able to see play right now together with tier. There's King of the Swamp, there's Shadow stuff, there's Mikanko stuff. There is literally a bunch of things. So maybe to start things off, what are your thoughts on the future of tier? Do you think it's still going to be a good contender?
This is something I've been struggling to kind of understand for myself in the format. Putting them all to 1 lowers consistency a lot. And the no kit obviously lowers your power level a lot. So from both aspects, the deck is harshly weakened. And you have to make up that missing power and missing consistency somewhere.
Yes.
So I'm currently messing around with a bunch of ideas. You can play Foolish Burial Goods to send Terrific Karma to add the field spell to keep up consistency, or Rainbow Bridge to add the field spell as well. They have different upsides. Retrieve a Karma can add any of the other spells or traps in the archetype,
Mm-hmm.
And also doesn't require you playing the Tortoise. What's cool about the Tortoise is if you have the Tortoise as well, even though it's a brick, it means that now you can go send a tier with Rhino Heart, fuse away the Tortoise from hand, so you can make Kaleido Heart, because before otherwise just Rhino does nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can pop your own Kaleido Heart with a field spell and search for a trap, and that's like a decent one-card setup. In fact, it's a rather strong one-card setup when you back up other stuff.
It being an Aqua is nice.
Ambitious.
Yeah. No, I think it's cool. I think any engine with Foolish Burial Goods works fine because you're able to send everything else as well. If you may need to send Salik or something like that.
Yeah.
So I like that. And together with that, I think also 3 Scream is quite important. What's your thoughts on that? I think if you want to get to your chops, like you need to play.
The card is something that's so hard to like theorize.
Yes.
And this is the true even from before, where a lot of people take it out of their decks when they're just looking at it from a very theory perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Because from like a far distance, that card seems like it's not that good. Just milling 3 isn't amazing. When you actually play with it, you realize how integral it is to keeping up a grind game.
Yes.
However, now when you're theorizing again, I'm faced with the same issue of it doesn't seem that great by itself in opening hands, just being essentially a mill 3 as your first activation of it.
Mm-hmm.
You also have less tiers to turn it on straight away, and you have less tiers to make your mills good. So these are all things that I have to keep in mind when I'm putting it in my deck. And I have versions of tiers where I'm going between 0 to 3, and I have almost any number available. And truthfully, I don't have a good answer because, as I said, that loss of consistency may just make it not worth it because that Scream may not help with the consistency issue. But in other ways, it might if you can get the tier cards. It really is quite of a
like you said, at first we can
dilemma.
only theorize, right? And then after some time, you sort of figure out or hope to figure out. I feel like, I don't know, in theory, it should work fine because you want to get to your chap cards. Because like going to, like climbing to Kaleido, popping it with the field spell, it's like, I don't know, it just seems awkward right now with that little tiers, basically. And also the entire weird thing about like fusion summoning, putting them to the bottom and then having to somehow get them to the top to actually mill them.
Yeah,
like
you need a way to shuffle your deck somehow. Which is something we never really had to do before.
Yes.
Like tactical shuffling is a thing now, which is very strange to say.
Yes, it is. It just feels very weird, but I guess it's something that you have to do right now. So, I guess
actually before we move on the topic of that, I've had some interesting thoughts where maybe you play something like Pot of Desires or Gizmek in those type of decks. And while that seems very counterintuitive to wanting to banish your cards face down, I've noticed through playing the tier deck for months that the deck is incredibly strong once you have very few cards in your deck because you get to stack your deck in a sense where you can constantly control where each card is in the top or bottom when you have only like 5 cards left, and then your mills hit incredibly hard every single time. So maybe that's a dumb idea, but if I can get 1 or 2 tiers to my hand or out of my deck first and then resolve a Desires or a Gizmek, and then get those upsides as well, maybe that's something that can solve that issue of your deck being kind of scarce of graveyard effects.
I think that's an interesting approach. What would you do with the Gizmek on the field? Is there a way to utilize it?
I mean, you can link with it. You can... So, like, what you can do is make IP and then IP into, like, Unicorn or into Sprint on your opponent's turn is pretty good. Otherwise, it can just pop cards. It's a decently sized body that's pretty good at pressuring out stuff. Curious is a thing as well if you have other engines in there. Like, you could play Destrudos and that type of deck, and then Ancient Fairy searching Pearl Rhino is pretty good.
Well, that sounds cool.
And then, or it's Gizmek as a machine, and then Destrudo's a dragon, and then plus a tier is 3, and then you go Curious. Wait, no, Curious is banned. I can't say that. Right. It has been a while.
Yeah. No, Curious is banned. Curious is banned, yeah.
Curious was already banned from last list. Never mind, not Curious.
We both literally just had a glitch and just believed Curious is here to solve all our problems. Okay.
Sometimes you have those. Sometimes when a card gets banned at the wrong moment, it doesn't click that it was actually hit.
It was so
never mind.
Weird.
Ignore the Curious stuff. Yeah.
So, yes, no Curious. However, do you feel like, well, actually, now that I think about it, like some people said, like maybe going back to the danger route of everything, but what are they really doing for you without Curious? I guess Nessie still being an Aqua, do you feel like it maybe should be added as like...
But the Aqua doesn't even make it Kalos anymore. It's only for Kaleido Heart. And the thing is, Kaleido Heart itself is only good if you have the field spell.
True.
So like it's not, I don't love it.
It's weird. What do you think about Winda? Do you like Winda? Like from the OCG, they started to run Winda immediately.
Winda's a good card. Is it good right now, though, is my question, because it's not fantastic versus Despia, and it's not great versus Kashtira. It's not like terrible, but I don't love it. I do think that the Shaddoll cards are decent, largely in part because Hell Shaddoll is like a mini Ishizu. So just keep going through your deck a little bit faster.
I like Hell Shaddoll.
I like that part.
I like that addition as well. I think that was cool. So what else did I play? Oh, King of the Swamp, of course. And then you have the option of going into Guardian Chimera, the Grapha Fusion, all of that.
I feel like that's almost a must now.
Yes.
The Grapha is really good, and so is Chimera. So it's a way of like re-upping consistency and power in the deck, both things this deck needed.
What do you think about adding Kashtira cards? Like it happened in the OCG, but of course the builds will have to change, of utilizing that engine as well.
Yeah, I mean, Fenrir gets your Tier Kashtira, which makes rank 7 as well if you want to. You can make Dracossack and then Cherubini, and Cherubini can put King of Swamp in the graves, and then you can make Sprint. So it lets you fusion really whatever you want. That's nice. And then just getting to your Tier Kashtira, which is both a hand trap and an extender, is fantastic. Yeah, it's probably like the best resource we still have at 3 besides Planet. So.
That's true. Their field spell is also nice, and I remember in the OCG they played set rotation as well. Probably because Sperlerana was limited, so they had to have more ways of going into it. But yeah, their field spell is nice as well. What else is there when it comes to tier? Did we miss anything? Oh, the Mikanko stuff. I think the Mikanko engine is cool. I think it's really, really nice.
I really like it. However, I think it's best when you're expecting to play against a lot of Bestial stuff. And I'm curious right now if Bestials will still see a ton of play. If there's not going to be much Tier Element, and there's going to be a lot of Kashtira, then I argue that Bestials are going to have a large like fall off in popularity. And if that's the case, then the Mikanko stuff is just really a way to discard cards from your hand with a disrupt at the end, which is not terrible, but it's also probably not worth your deck spots. You'd want other stuff for your consistency.
Okay. I mean, I think it's weird because Bestials remind me of Nibiru. Like the second they're going to fall off, the Joytrons and all of the others are going to become better again, and then everyone's gonna.
But I think Nibiru is a lot more generic than the Bestials are, and the Bestials may still see some play in like the Magnamut levels, but I think it'll be rare to see the level of 12 Bestials in the main deck for a long time. And if there's like just 3 in their deck or 4, then it's a lot less likely for it to happen. Like that's not a reliable enough reason to play a card. I'm not going to play like Ash just to beat Eclipse. I have to think Ash is good for other reasons as well.
True. I mean, I guess that's a topic for a bit later. I want to discuss the hand traps and the tech cards and your view on all of that. But yes, I guess with Tier Lament, I think it's just the only thing that needs to happen is a whole lot of testing. Like people just need to literally come up with something, everyone for themselves, because it's the best way to actually achieve something, to test every single engine, as weird as it may seem, and then you just decide for yourself.
Tier is probably the hardest deck to theorize, so it makes sense that it'd be the weirdest one to come with an end list for. Yeah, I'm excited to see what happens with it because I'm not the only person trying to figure it out right now.
Yeah, no, 100%. Moving on, I wanted to talk about Sprite as well. Where does Sprite go from here? So, what are your thoughts on it?
I do think it's a pretty massive hit.
Okay.
Yeah, like Alpha's a nuts card. It's extension, it's disruption, and it's protection. Like that's really all you can want in the card.
Yes.
There's not a replacement for it. There's just nothing like it in the game. So like Sprite lose their ability to like, you don't get the multiple negates with Toad anymore. So even if they want to force the Toad, which they can, it's not as powerful. It also isn't protected from targeting anymore, so it's worse in that aspect.
Bad. Yeah.
And they also can't use it to like get follow-up by reviving stuff like blue. So now they have to keep in like they're in a similar position to Tier, but instead of making up consistency, they have to make up follow-up and make up power. So like they have those two things to kind of make up for. I've never really been too big of a fan of the deck anyways. Okay. But I'm having a hard time seeing how they could do that in a good way, how to make up both those aspects. So
I was thinking about the Cerberus Gadget stuff with Silent Mining. If you've seen that, I like that a lot. When I was doing some combos, it's of course it's weird, and then you end on the board and you're like, oh, no targeting protection, that sucks. But like at least there's something. I feel like hands with gadget and starter, for example, it's essentially 1 to 2 card combos, and they still end on things. You know, you have Sprite, you're able to go for Mannequin Cat if that's what you want. And I guess Mannequin Cat, I think, is going to be quite big in terms of follow-up.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be very important. Like, Double Cross is still there. So everyone always says, like, Double Cross is such a powerful card, but not many people actually play it because it's like, oh, it's trap card and it's brick. So we'll see if that becomes a thing as well, because you're able to end on it for additional disruptions. But then you need to decide, like, do I want follow-up? Do I want to get starter? Do I want to actually play on the next couple of turns? So it does become a bit odd. Like,
yeah, a lot of the time now you have to kind of choose between starter for follow-up or something for protection, and that's a lot harder of a decision to make. Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. I think Sprite can still get sort of carried by the tech cards because it has enough space to run them. So if you really tailor your build accordingly, I think you're able to do well, even if your boards may seem a bit weaker. Because, like, mathematically, you should have the at least hand traps or something in your hand to sort of protect you.
Yeah, it's the issue is with anything like that, like those heavy board breakers or heavy, like, teched out decks, is in these open metas, it's hard to know what you're going to play against, and you can't really cover everything at once. So you are going to be having to roll the dice a bit on what you're playing against, and another level of variance that I don't really want to have.
I agree. Like, I don't want to go too much off on a tangent, but I personally love 1 to 2 deck formats. I really like them. It's much easier to decide and prepare and all that.
It's a bit bittersweet for me right now.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I agree. I agree. This video is just mourning of Tier Lament at this point. So, yes, I wanted to mention the Bujinki Ahashima link as well, which is able to summon Toad. I think that's kind of cool. I like that.
I think it's a waste. I mean, it's just so much, like, committing into it. Yeah, like, it's a lot of cards.
True. That is true.
And the Toad is just 1 interrupt now, not 2.
Yeah. I don't know. I like it, like, because obviously in that build that I talked about with Silent Mining and all of that, you're playing swap anyway because you're playing 3 Angler as well. So it's like, it's just a very feels good moment if you're able to go swap pitch Angler.
If you're already playing swap, then sure, that feels like it's a pretty big engine at that point. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it might be. I think all of it just needs to be tested a lot. There's also Runic Sprite as well, but Elf did play a big part in that, I think. Like, being able to just give you follow-up over and over again, and the insane amount of draws you were able to get off of all of your draw cards is just insane. So there's that. There's the Gishki stuff as well. So I spent a lot of hours theorizing Gishki and thinking about Gishki, and it's just, I don't know, like, it just feels too weak. And that makes me very sad to say, but it doesn't seem that great.
Yeah. And Elf wasn't a big part of that deck as well, right?
It was.
Being able to use the I think it's Abyss another time. Yeah.
Oh, that was cool. It was a really cool combo, but without Elf, it just makes it just, I don't know. And the engine was huge. Like, the Gishki engine was so many cards. And I don't know.
Yeah, and then you have less space for tech cards, and it's this whole issue of what's the perfect ratio.
Moving on to the other deck, Kashtira. I want to know first, because I have my thoughts on Kashtira, how much impact do you think it's going to have? And if you feel like it seems a bit of an overhyped deck in a sense, because it's so easily countered, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so this is one I have a hard time kind of grappling with myself, because I think the deck is not great, largely in part to how vulnerable it is to so many different things. And that if everyone is targeting it, there's no way I can possibly bring myself to get this to a tournament. But at the same time, if it goes uncontested, its end fields are definitely the strongest. And it does have good variation in the plays where there's not, like, great counters to it every single time. Like, if you're playing a deck that needs the graveyard, Nibiru is in theory strong, but not always good if they play around it. But at the same time, if you put something like Eclipse in and they go for the play like locking off 5, which is not that unlikely but is risky, then I now lose that way. So it's something I have a hard time with, because it's just very frustrating to play against, and I feel like you have very little agency over what happens inside the game. It all has to go in the deck building process, and there's so many cards like you'd have to put in against the deck that just suck versus other stuff. So it does kind of suck. At the same time, if I'm on the perspective of the Kashtira player, I don't know how I could play through a whole tournament where my deck is being so heavily targeted, knowing my deck is so weak to these cards.
Yes.
It's not like it's a Bestial versus Tier where the Tier player can push through it. So I don't know. Not super keen on the Kashtira deck.
Well, I have the same thoughts, actually. I just felt like some people were saying, like, I literally had comments of people saying Kashtira is going to overpower Tier. And I was like, whoa, that's wild. That's a wild statement. Like, I think the deck, it being that vulnerable was a very good word you used. At being that fragile in a sense, like, to me, it just seemed way overhyped. It seemed like if as many people as they are going to prepare for the deck, like, the deck is not going to be able to do that well if the pilot isn't as skilled, I think. So then there's that, a lot of people are going to jump on it. And the difference is going to show, I think. It's weird. Kashtira is weird. I'm not sure what to expect, to be honest with you. The zone locking is very annoying, though. That's horrible. And in, like, the regular combos, they would go for, like...
Cosmos too.
Yeah, true. That's also true. Shifter, of course, is seeing play in that deck as well. So if you're struggling against Shifter, that's another thing you have to deal with. And the zone locking, it just happens. Like, the combos of 2 to 3 zones being locked, that's almost every single opening combo at this point. So it's quite hard to compete against. So I don't know. We'll see. It is quite expensive, though. So there's that.
Yeah, a bit of a barrier as well. I mean, if I was looking for a new deck to play, I would not spend the money on Kashtira. I don't think it's worth it.
That's actually a great segue, because as the next topic of discussion, I wanted to mention a couple decks that I feel like, are going to be some of the top contenders. And also, I want to hear your thoughts, of course. So what do you think, for example, about Sorzo? Because it was quite interesting how it crept up in the format again, out of nowhere almost.
I never understood why it was seeing play last format. I felt like it did not have a good Tier matchup. I really just blame Pack for playing it.
There was a lot of hype around that, yes.
I don't think it was very good against Tier. It's not a deck I've played much, though, recently, so I'm not sure how its Kashtira matchup is. That would be nice. It loses a good matchup in Flu. But in theory, that if its good matchup is gone, then maybe it's a deck that sees play again. What I'm not a fan of, though, is when I did play it a couple of years ago, I found it kind of had a hard time for stuff like Lava Golem, Sphere Mode, Book of Eclipse. And now these are cards that people are going to want to play to deal with the Kashtira stuff. So you're caught in the crossfire a bit. And that's not something I'm super fan of, or I'm not super fond of, for sure. And what do you gain from that in exchange for that sacrifice? And that's not something I've fully understood yet. I'm messing around with that idea. And I think this deck could be solid. However, I think if it's just having the same issues as other decks, it's maybe just on par with them, not anything better. I don't think it's necessarily bad, but it's not a standout pick for me.
That's fair. I think why I wanted to mention it is because it's very, very affordable. And for anyone getting into the game or picking it up again or whatever, I feel like it's not a bad deck to pick up, because it is going to teach you a lot. And I think it's one of those decks that rewards good, skillful gameplay. And I feel like it's a deck that you're able to just continue playing and exploring with it.
Yeah.
So it does seem like a decent contender, also because it has enough space to play the tech cards once we figure out which tech cards should probably be played. So there's that as well. And also the shufflers and the Bishios don't really hurt your Tenies that much anymore. If Bishios fall off, that is, which was quite big. Like, you weren't always able to banish from the hand. And if you had to get them to the graveyard, you're going to lose them. So that kind of sucked, which shouldn't be an issue anymore, at least that much. So yeah, I think it's not bad. And another one I wanted to mention is Branded Despia and also the Bishio Dragon Link deck, because all of them are using Bishios. So yeah, what do you think about those decks?
I mean, those are also relatively cheap. I mean, the biggest expense is Lubellion, probably. And you could get away with playing one and maybe even less.
Yeah, but did you see the price spike?
Popular...
It became so expensive. Sorry to cut you off, but did you see the price spike? Like, it was kind of wild.
I have
like,
not.
The billions, I'm sure, I think they're like $130 at this point. I don't know. They were quite expensive before, but not that much.
Yeah, no, that is a lot.
Yes.
I just sell mine at this point if I'm not going to use them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think that card is like even crazy mandatory. Like one is like kind of nice to have, but the Bestials are not incredibly strong if there's expecting a lot of Kashtira. So if that happens, then maybe you play less Bestials.
Might happen.
And that's fine as well. That makes Dexy's Bestials as an engine kind of worse. That makes me kind of think Dragon Link maybe isn't as strong. But as for the Despia, there's so many other ways for it to be built without heavily relying on the Bestials. That's fine. That deck is strong. My biggest issue with it is the same thing that's always had. Is it's really weak when they like target negating Branded Fusion with stuff like Ash.
Yes.
So I don't love having to relive those hands where I have like nothing besides Branded Fusion going on.
Like literally, that's my only thing that I like about moving to a new format is the fact that we're actually going to be able to justify playing more hand traps, because before you didn't really play something like Ash because it didn't do that much against tier. They would play through it anyway. And I just felt so bad getting Branded Fusion every single turn of every single tournament. And I was like, I can't wait to put Ash back in my deck. Just Ash all of you. So there's that. The new support is nice. I really like the Guignol and the Rinbrum, I think is called right now.
Yeah.
Like putting more stuff on the board, more disruptions. I think it's cool. I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the top contenders as well. It's been one more standout because it is a very strong infield. It is consistent. It's just the weakness to Ash right now, I think, is a big thing for me.
Yeah, no, true. That's very true. It's important to point out when it comes to the Despia deck. Then there's a couple decks that sort of fell off. Like I mentioned before, there's Joytron. Runic as well struggled a bit against the Shufflers because your field spell draw is never going to go off. And there's other ones that may not be as great of contenders, like Eldritch and maybe Mathmech.
Yeah.
But what do you
thing is with like Runic, you're still not out of the water. So if you play against like Kashtira, even if you're able to stop them from setting up their full field, Kashtira Birth says that when they use a spell, you banish 3 from their grave.
That's true. That's another one.
It's an effect that a lot of people may not realize because it's not the important part of the effect and it's the third effect.
Yes.
But if you're playing a Runic deck, you just can't resolve the field spell still. So that is very upsetting.
It is kind of upsetting though. But I am a fan of not seeing the stun Runic deck anywhere because it's like, I cannot. Why would you do it?
Not enjoyable.
No.
For either player.
True. All right, so there's that. I mean, Joytron, I guess, might go up in popularity again because people are such huge fans of Joytron. I think that's what it is. Like, they just love Joytron. So the second it becomes better again, more people are going to play it.
I've never quite enjoyed that deck, but that's what people enjoy, then ultimately, yes. I'm not sure what they're trying to end on. Birth is kind of rough. I think if they have Birth plus a Kashtira name, that's kind of good. What other decks do? I mean, if Imperm's in the meta, so the thing is, like, if everyone's playing Eclipse, you want to have it out to Eclipse. Otherwise, you're like Vanya's Ruler does nothing.
Yes.
And what else are you ending on? I guess you end on the Counter Trap a lot of the time. It's probably fine. It's probably a fine
the
deck.
Magic-y one.
Yeah, Magic-y unlocking.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I guess they can end on that. They have the Link as well, the Herald Link. If they still want to play that. And there's a turn skip thing. Yeah. I mean, yes, if anyone, out there loves Joytron, make sure to let us down in the comments. Let us know what you think about Joytron and how it should be played moving forward. So there's other things as well. Like we have Labyrinth. So I wanted to discuss Labyrinth. I think it's going to be quite strong moving forward. And it's interesting to see, a trap deck actually be present in the meta with how trap decks just got treated quite badly in the last couple of years. But I think they're doing a good job with, printing the big Welcome Labyrinth and more normal trap cards that actually can help the deck. I think it's not bad at all.
Yeah, no, a very good support card for sure. Triggers the field spell. I'm pretty sure it triggers like a bunch of like the Ariana and the lady, all that stuff triggers, which is fantastic. The thing is, though, again, is like I don't know how these decks deal with Kashtira. Like, then unlocking your back row zones is rough. It requires them to just know what you're playing to have that kind of foresight. So, at least from my perspective, when I'm going to a big YCS, is that unfortunately people will know what I'm playing pretty early on in the tournament.
True.
So maybe it's not a concern everyone has, but like if you are just playing a locals environment, it's a small tournament, so people will see what you're playing, and then if they're playing Kashtira again, you just don't have trap card zones. I don't love having this auto concede dynamic matchup, but If there's no other solution, then maybe. Other than that, the deck seems okay. What I also don't like is it's kind of like not fantastic against Guardian Chimera, and you have to put those floodgates in to stop that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get into this just floodgate deck, and it's not fun. But I mean, it's probably fine. Labyrinth is a decent pick right now for sure.
Yeah, no, that was well said. And since you mentioned the locking of zones, I want to hear your thoughts on Draco Slayer. So I've been playing them in the last format, and I enjoyed them a lot. And I think the deck is very, very strong. But like we mentioned before with the Kashtira matchup, it becomes a bit weird. Do you feel like it's worth playing, even though you know they are going to be aiming for your zones, if you are sort of relying on like going second cards and being able to break the board regardless, or is it going to fall off simply because of that fact that they're locking your zones, making you unable to play?
Yeah. So the reality is that almost any deck going second versus Kashtira, if you don't have good interrupts or board breakers, you're going to lose that game anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that's necessarily a great reason to say that pendulums are unplayable in this format.
Mm-hmm.
I think pendulums have a ton of other intrinsic issues, just like just not being great into fields at all.
Okay,
but
yeah, fair.
The Kashtira field is going to be a hard problem for every deck. And you're already wanting to play stuff like Lava Golem, so that'll help as well.
Mm-hmm. No, that's what I was thinking, because it's like, if you know for a fact when you're in a match, like, okay, I might lose one game because they're going first, the deck is not bad, and if I don't draw my going second cards, it's whatever, it is a lose situation anyway. So I personally didn't think like that's reason enough for anyone to necessarily drop the deck, but I might be biased in this situation. So I think it's nice, and many people don't know what it does. They have no clue what it does. Yeah. So that's an upside as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's not enough reason alone to drop the deck, and the deck still has some merits to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many decks right now that almost have to say, if I lose the roll to Kashtira game 1, I kind of just don't care and I concede, which is a terrible thing to exist. But if that's what has to exist, then so be it, I guess.
Honestly, I would just go back to the tier format if it was up to me, low key. But okay, the next one. I wanted to talk about the Rika deck. So I've seen a lot of people hype up Rika in the last day or so, because it was never necessarily bad. After the WCQ Europe win, it was nice, and then it sort of like felt like it fell off, but the deck was never bad. And right now I think it's quite strong with the amount of interruptions you have. There's so many things the deck is able to do. Also one of those quite unknown decks, and I don't know, I personally like it. It's able to utilize rivalry, which kind of sucks, but it's cool for the Rika deck, so yeah.
So this is a deck I'm not too familiar with, so my insight is rather shallow. From other experts on the deck have told me their biggest concern is you can't really play board breakers in this deck as well as you can in other decks, because the Diablosis Mind Hacker ripping from your extra deck is actually quite a big deal.
Okay.
Because it's a rather fragile extra deck.
Mm-hmm.
And that put me off quite a bit. And then at the same time, it's again, if you get caught in the crossfire of being weak to stuff like Lava Golem, that's not fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Although granted, there's not much that really can play around it super well, so... the exception being Despia is probably the best way to play around Lava Golem.
I don't know. I think the deck is very, very interesting. But I guess we'll just see what happens with it. And I also wanted to mention the Plunder Patrol deck, which I think is quite strong. I've been playing against it a bunch, like testing, and I think it's able to do a lot of things with the adventure stuff and all that. And again, people don't know what it's doing. Like, I think the support is nice.
Myself included. I don't really know what these cards do, so I'm gonna have to step out
literally. I said I'm testing against it. I go to locals.
To what this does.
Yeah, I played against this one friend that just plays Plunder, and I'm like, okay, teach me, show me how it's done. Like, explain to me, what do I disrupt? It's like, because you don't know. Many people don't, and something to think about. Something he mentioned is the fact that as soon as hand traps start to see more play, it becomes a bit tougher because it loses quite hard to certain hand traps. However, because it's able to run the adventure stuff, and also there's options of running the punk cards, because you're able to go into your generic synchros, which are 8. So that's a cool addition. And with them, you're able to bait out certain things, and adventure stuff is a huge bait by itself. So you are better off. However, there's probably still some weaknesses to it. It is like top of Rogue, probably, or a tier 2 contender. So there's always going to be some things the deck struggles with. But yeah, it does seem quite strong regardless.
Yeah, I can't.
So yeah,
add more input. Sadly,
there's that. Also, what do you think? I wanted to include this like almost as a meme because I personally don't really think it's good and don't really like it. But what do you think about Dark World?
More toxic decks. I mean, just the fact that you can hand loop.
Yeah.
Is not something I want in the game. As I really don't want to play against this deck.
Mm-hmm.
If Bestials do drop in prominence, then this deck could be decent just because that hand loop is nasty.
Yes.
But if you get Bestials, it almost does nothing. So it is a bit of a curious spot.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I wanted to mention it because it came out in the middle of that highly intense format, and you know, it was just kind of bad. And right now
it is a curious deck. Yeah. I'm really not sure. So my inclination is to say it's inconsistent based off how the old Dark World deck was.
Okay.
And I'm not sure how that's fixed. Genta is a really strong card. That would be like the biggest thing that maybe addresses that.
It is, yes.
I don't know if that's enough though.
I don't know.
Not really. I mean, Dangerous help as well.
Yeah, I mean, they do, I guess. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of it. I don't think it's that great, but I figured I would just ask you for your thoughts on it. So I guess when it comes to decks, I think that would be it. Is there anything I maybe missed? Anything that's worth talking about when it comes to decks in particular?
I think maybe the only thing would be like a Runic Naturia deck.
True. I did not mention Naturia. That's true. So, I mean, Ishizu cards did a lot for the deck. They truly did. So...
But they were playing that deck above 40 anyways, so maybe now with the limits it goes down to 40 and that's acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't ever really played the deck. To me, it always just felt like it invested a lot of cards to get going, and if your opponent just waited for you to like invest all those cards and then stop the payoff draw, kind of just sat there and did nothing. So if that happens, you kind of just lose. And that always put me off the deck. So I'm not sure if it's very good. Maybe it's me overlooking it. Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's, especially comparing the Vernusylph stuff to Runic, I think Runic was a better engine to pair the deck together with. Like, you needed the draws. And like you said, if the draws get stopped, which, again, against Birth might be the case. So it just becomes a bit weirder to play into a format. But I'm sure there's ways of doing it. I just didn't really look into it that much to tell. So, I don't know. I think it might be, but the shufflers and Ishizu cards, they did a lot. So we'll see what happens with that deck. And to maybe round things off, I figured we would just talk about if there is such a thing as determining this at this point already. Do you feel like hand traps or power spells should be the way to go when it comes to deck cards and flex spots in a person's deck?
So the hard part with the early days of the format is to get a read on what you expect your opponent to be playing.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, we don't really have a good idea of if hand traps or power spells will be good at the moment. Like, at the time of recording this, it's the Wednesday of the ban after the ban list. It's not in effect yet. So
true.
I have to wonder. If I'm expecting a lot of Kashira, I'm inclined not to play that many hand traps because I want board breakers. And if I'm not expecting Kashira, then hand traps may be better. Except like Bestials. Where do Bestials fall in the format?
Yeah.
And I don't want those versus Kashira. They're okay versus Sword Soul, not fantastic. They're good versus Tyr. They're fantastic versus Tyr now, in fact. They're good versus Despia. It's hard to know where exactly everything falls in the format right now without having good data to go off of. There's no tournaments to derive data from. There's not even DB play yet. Mm-hmm. So we are kind of making wild guesses.
Mm-hmm. True.
What does stand out to me is probably some of the better cards right now in the format are Lava Golem and Book of Eclipse as far as board breaker goes.
Yes.
Because they are pretty flexible and can cover a lot of bases really well, such as like versus Sword versus Kashira. To an extent versus Despia, they're not terrible. They aren't fantastic.
I mean, Tyr as well. It's fine.
And they also are rather hard to counter. And as for hand traps, two cards you really like almost either way are Ash and Nibiru. Ash hitting the branded stuff is fantastic. Like,
yes.
So powerful in what it does.
Yeah.
And not replaceable by anything else that probably warrants its play. And I do think there will be I do think there will be a good amount of Despia, at least on initial glance.
Yeah.
And Nibiru is good versus a bunch of different stuff, maybe Despia is the exception there, but even then, it is possible for them to play into it.
It is actually, like with the opening combo, they will summon the 5th time when they summon Cartesia, I think.
Yeah, so when they very often can.
Yeah. So that's cool. That feels good. Yeah, I wanted to actually talk about this topic because it seems as though everything is going to be able to see play. I don't think it's going to be, at least right now, the first couple of days, a format where we shift very hard towards either hand traps or word breakers, because some hand traps and some word breakers are that impactful. So I feel like it's more so going to be the case of whether or not you're main decking certain things or siding them. So if you just want to have a bunch of generic things in the main deck, like maybe go for Ash, Nibiru, stuff like that, and just side for a specific matchup, I think that's the way to go, at least right now. So,
yeah, the format is still young, so having specific targets to your deck is hard.
Yeah.
And we will have to play it by ear for now. This could change within a day, our perspectives.
So, yeah, that's very, very true. Wow, that's pretty much going to be it. We've been talking for some time now. There was a lot to talk about. But yeah, I am insanely excited to have had you today on the channel with me to discuss all of that. So thank you for coming. It was a very good time to get to talk to you about all of that. So yeah.
Thank you for having me. If you guys want to hear more from me, you can check out my channel, Jesse Cotton Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yes.
On YouTube.
So all of his information is most definitely going to be in the description box down below. So make sure to check him out. He literally just started and he is doing incredibly well. The content is on point. It's insanely high value and good quality. So I couldn't recommend it enough. And yeah, if you guys enjoyed it, please let us know in the comments and give the video a like. Like I said, check out Jesse on all of his socials. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.